I've been seeing a lot of this guy, and overall a lot of Manosphere right-wing misogynistic content. And it's quite interesting because it reminds me a lot of alternative medicine. I've spoken at length about alternative medicine from the book If It Sounds Like a Quack, which is a great book on the subject. But generally speaking, what you'll find is that a great deal of people who turn to alternative medicine usually do so out of desperation. So for instance, if they can't afford a $500,000 chemotherapy treatment, then they will maybe spend $2,500 on an alternative method of treatment because maybe it'll work. This is also why people turn to things like faith healing, usually out of desperation because they can't afford medical treatment, they lack the financial means to do so, and they're willing to try anything to help themselves heal. But what's interesting is that faith healers don't work in hospitals. You will only see faith healers doing faith healing on people with non-visible injuries in environments that they can totally control. And so you will only see this guy only talk to largely college students in environments that he can control outside of college campuses. He is not taken very seriously because his beliefs cannot be replicated through peer review. Like, imagine this guy trying to do a master's thesis defense with his argument of methods that he applies at college campuses, where he will deliberately misunderstand people, go on tangents, and try to change the subject whenever he's challenged. Like, there's just no way that he would be taken seriously. Now, imagine him trying to do that and write published papers that will survive through peer review. You can't do that. And so that's the reason why he's almost always at college campuses, because he can control it, but also because he's not very serious, nor are his beliefs very credible. So then the question becomes, well, if these views aren't very factual, nor do they withstand scrutiny, then why do guys like this guy or this guy have such a following? Well, the answer to that is a combination of dealing with engagement-based algorithms, where the most engagement, positive or negative, gets the most views. But it's also the fact that there is an element of desperation to be found in their audience. Well, the followers of guys like this tend to be two types of people, either young evangelical men or men who are a little bit older, into their 30s and 40s. And what's interesting to note is that these men tend to cling onto this message because it soothes their insecurities. It shows an assertive voice that gets to say whatever they want about subjects that they feel insecure about. Like, why else would you cling on to this idea that men have it harder than women if you yourself weren't dealing with feelings of inadequacy? Why else would you cling onto a message that women will die alone and loveless without men like you if you yourself were not scared of having a lonely existence for the rest of your life? So what makes these young men desperate to cling on to this message? In my personal experience, I would say that it is an evangelical upbringing or culture. Because the thing about evangelical culture is that it teaches you a lot of things that are unhealthy. For a lot of men, it's this belief that their existence needs to be validated somehow, when in reality, your existence justifies itself. There's other things too. There's a lot of teaching in Christianity that you are not good enough. No matter what you do, you will always be a sinner, therefore you always require salvation. On top of that, when it comes to women, the understanding of women when it comes to men in the evangelical church is largely either idealizing them as being the mother of children or the bearer of children, or infantilizing them as being weak beings that need protection. This anxiety of lacking validation, combined with the inability to view women as equals, is also often why these manosphere content creators tend to go after women who are self-sufficient, people who genuinely like to be by themselves and don't feel the need to have children or get married. And this scares them because they don't understand it, because they have been taught to always seek validation from someone else and that someone is going to save them. So what do you do if you know people and you're trying to bring them out of this space, if you're trying to get them out of this sense of desperation or just out of the manosphere, if you will? Well, generally what works best is if you can provide them with new information that they might not have heard before. Because another thing about fear is that one of the easiest ways to overcome it is through awareness. For instance, if you're scared of the dark, you turn on a light so you know what your surroundings are, therefore you're less scared. That's one way of doing it. And usually, if you can present someone with new information that they might not have heard before, oftentimes it actually can work. It worked on me when I was in college, and it can work on these young men as well. What does concern me, though, is that the solution to dealing with misogyny is generally education and self-improvement. But in practice, most men don't do that. Instead, they turn to repression. And we need to understand the motivations as to why these influencers are so popular in the first place, so that we can better understand and prevent that from spreading in the future.